My name is Jason Dell. I'm Security Practice Manager. I think I introduced myself to everybody except maybe you. Hi. I've been with Network Solutions now for 21 years, and I've been focused on security. Gosh, I've been saying for 10 years, for probably 5 years, so long time. And I've been the practice manager now for about 10 years. Okay, so there's the history of that. Now that we got through our history lesson. Let's talk about the 3100 series. So the big deal with the 3100 series, fairly new, is that prior to that, whenever you go and look for a firewall and you'd say how much throughput can this firewall support, the specs would always show just the firewall less VPN. Right? If you didn't run VPN, they'd say, oh, this firewall can run, can sustain like a gig of throughput, let's say. But what they didn't tell you, anybody told you, is that when you're trying to run that through a VPN, it puts it in half. So it's only 500 meg throughput, right? So it's significant if you're on a VPN-dependent network topology. Cisco was the first company to publish out there, here's your throughput, and then here's the throughput with the VPN. So they're the first ones to get the sort of keep it honest part of that. But the cool thing about the 3100 is with newer technology, now that VPN throughput is the same as a firewall throughput. So if you got a firewall that can do a gig throughput, the VPN can also do a gig throughput with some cool new technology that I won't bore you with, but it does that. So now you can get these throughputs that match just the same, and of course there's faster technology and such. So that's a 3100 model. And I think there's actually an even newer one. I want to say it's 4200, 4300 series.
That's what they have.
4200?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's hot off the press too. Same thing, just bigger, faster. Yeah. All right. So then the new Cisco Secure Firewall Threat Defense, which Cisco rebranded their products to put Cisco Secure ahead of a lot of it now. It's no longer called Cisco Secure, rather it's no longer called Next Generation Firewall. Cisco calls it, or even Firepower Firewall, now they call it Cisco Secure Firewall. So the software on that is called Firepower Threat Defense, and the management platform is called the Cisco Secure Firewall Management Center. So it's luckily still the FMC, but it's a very long name. So if you've ever gone down and had to install Cisco software to apply to either any of your applications or any of your routers and such, you'll know that there's always the gold star release out there. That's the Cisco recommended release. There's older and there's always newer, a couple of versions, but they recommend you use this sort of long-term release that's just well-trained. And so that's the one that you really should do unless there's some feature in this next one that you just have to have. So sort of hot off the press, 7.2.4 is the newly released one. So I'll go through just quickly from 7 to 7.2.4 new features. 7.0, Snort 3 is the default inspection engine. I'll talk about Snort a little bit, but Snort is the intrusion prevention software technology that's within it. The difference between 2 and 3 is faster, actually. 2 used to queue up any of the requests to the Snort engine, so it'd get kind of backed up. And now Snort 3 can do multi-processing, symmetric multi-processing, right? It's multi-threaded, so it can handle many of them at once. And if you look at the firewall specs on how much the firewall can support, if you look at Snort 2 and Snort 3, it's significantly faster with just the same box, just different software. So that's very cool. With 7.1, we'll talk more about Snort and intrusion prevention. With 7.1, policy-based routing. Has anybody done policy-based routing on their firewall here? No. Yeah, you have, yeah. So, you had to go under and do flex config. You got to sort of get under the hood and get in places where you're not really supposed to go to get it to work. So with 7.1, it's actually in the GUI now. You can just have a look at that. So anybody, it might not mean much to people who've never done it before, but if you've gotten into flex config, this is a big deal. So any of that configuration you can now do right in the GUI. It's easier to use. And then 7.2.4, the gold star, deployment optimization. So with 7.2.4, they have a way of optimizing the deployment. If you've got a lot of configuration in your firewall, it can take a few minutes when you're doing, so you do the configuration on the FMC, right, the Firewall Management Center, and then you publish that out or deploy it out to your firewalls. Well, if you've got a complex configuration, that can take a long time. So they've really made that more efficient, and now they're doing more sort of delta deployments with it. So 7.2.4 is supposed to be faster, significantly better. Okay. Let's get on to the test drive. So I want to explain to you what the test drive, how this is going to work. If you've seen me present in the past, usually I'll put up just slides with pictures, images, graphs, have a conversation with you. This is a hands-on. You're going to be configuring a virtual FMC, deploying to virtual firewalls in a virtual environment. I've provisioned those pods to each of you, and they're good for a week. So after this, you can still toy around in there for a week if you like. It takes the full time. If you need to get up and leave, I get it. That's fine. Do your thing. You can still go in there and have a look at it, but we're going to be in there doing the configuration. So it's a lot different than just me sitting up here talking about slides and graphs and charts and stuff. It's actually getting your hands on it, okay? So to get started, let's go to that link in the email I sent you. If you don't remember, it's dcloud2-rtp.cisco.com. And log in with your cisco.com ID. And I will wait here until everyone's in that. That's dcloud2-rtp.cisco.com. Okay. So when you click on View, then you get, I can't click on it, these are just slides. You get this view. So this is your lab. And there's a full-out lab here that you can toy with. By clicking on, you don't need to click on resources now, but if you click on it, there's guides and you can go through all kinds of fun stuff. So if you have time in the next week, have fun. And if you bork up the whole lab, let me know and I can share another one with you. So, I mean, it's so you can configure and do whatever you want with it. But for now, we're just going to do a little scaled down one that we can fit into 2.5 hours. So if you click on your jump box, you should get a drop down where you can click on Remote Desktop. And then that will bring you here. Let me know when you're there. All right. So you're here and it automatically pops up this web page. It shows lots of options, but we only care about the one that says FMC Web. Okay, it's FMC Web. It'll look like something else. So we're going to cover now the basics of the FMC, just the very basics. And I'm kind of fly through a lot of this just so we have enough time at the very end to do a bit of troubleshooting and event viewing. That's where I was a bit short yesterday, so I want to make sure that's enough time. You'll see the Firewall Management Center login. Just click on login, even though it doesn't look like you can click on it. You should be able to. So when you click login, you should get to this screen. Apologize for the resolution, but at least you can see it better on your screens. Everyone here? Thumbs up real quick. Yeah, good, good, or nods. Anybody not there? Okay. All right. So this is the dashboard, and again, it's better to look on yours. I'll cover this in a little bit of what all goes on here. But the first thing is you can go over on the right-hand side under admin, that's the currently logged in user, and you can flick back and forth light and dark mode, or whichever your preference is, leave it there. There's a couple places where something doesn't show up in dark mode. Just flick it to light mode. You can do it from any location. Okay? All right, everyone play with that. And then when you're done, go to the question mark right next to the login. Click on About. So you can just see here and notice, like anything else where there's an About, what this is and what version it's on. Everyone see that? Yeah, so that's all right, so let's talk about licensing real quick. So in that same area, you see the gear. Then when you click on the gear, that's where your settings are. Okay? So you click on the gear and go to Universal Licenses. And it'll look like this. So to make any of the system settings with the FMC, go into that gear. Okay? So if any of you have used Cisco products that use smart licensing, it looks pretty similar to this. You see that it's already licensed to smart licensing. I'll talk about real quick what smart licensing is. So back in the day, I mean, now it's been several years now, Cisco decided to go away from on-box licensing to smart licensing, where you keep all your licenses sort of in a web portal or cloud portal, if you will. And then you register whatever the device or the service is to that cloud and it just draws whatever the licensing is from it. That's pretty easy then centrally to manage where you're at in compliance. So see, you got all the greens here. It tells you you're good to go. And the licenses here that we're interested in is the Firepower Management Center, the malware and threat and URL. And in this case, threat is the same as IPS, intrusion prevention. Okay? So everyone see this? Yeah. All right, great. Then if you want to click on devices, right, you'll get a drop down there, which I don't actually show. And I think it's device management, yeah. So devices and device management, it's not there, but. When you get to device management, you'll see this screen. Everyone there? Right, so when you're here, note that you can see the status of the firewalls. They're all green. In this case, there's 3 firewalls. Oh, well, 3 firewalls, but I think 1 or 2 of them are set up to HA, but that's logically still 1 firewall and HA unit, right, if you think about it. So 3 sets of firewalls. And notice it shows you what the model is. These are all virtual. And the version that's on there. So then here's another common theme in the FMC. To edit, we click on the pencil. Okay, pencil clear over there. And then you'll edit, next to NGFW1. That's the one we're looking to edit, that device. Okay. And so everyone see this screen? Anyone not see this screen? Okay. So on this page, you'll see then, note the interfaces. The interfaces here. In case you need more interfaces, you can have logical or sub-interfaces, kind of like 802.1q interfaces, if you will. And note the zones. So these are what are known as, old term, zone-based firewalls. You put your interfaces in zones, and then you apply your rules to the zones more so than to the interfaces. So you might have 2 ISPs or 3, and you might put those all into an internet zone or outside zone. You might have multiple inside interfaces and put those all into an inside zone. And then you might have 1 or more DMZs, and you can choose to put them in their own DMZ, or you can choose to group them all together into DMZs. Does that make sense, the zone-based firewall concept? Any questions on that? Okay, cool. Then let's go to device, and just to see what this shows. And we'll just look in here. So you can see the name, the model. You can see the serial number, in case you're ever looking for the serial number of a firewall. And the inspection engine, Snort 3, and you can switch back and forth from Snort 3 to Snort 2 if you ever want to do that. And just real quick, again, Snort 3 is better. So you can see you're on Snort 3 here for this particular device. And you see the licensing status up here, what this particular device is licensed for. You can click on the pencil there to get a bit of a pop-up to show you some detail of what's going on with the licensing. I don't have that shown here, but you can see where you can choose which licenses you want to apply to what. To this particular device. Make sense? All right, any questions here before I move on? No. Like I said, I'm going to move quickly through this, so just wave your hand if you have questions or need me to slow down. Tim?
Is this the actual interface for the device or just for this demo?
This, you look at the device through the FMC. So there's no GUI for the device per se. There is a command line if one really needs to, but that's usually for initially setting up or if you need to get support for it because something's going wrong with it. It's all through the FMC. If you have 1 or 100 firewalls. So this is sort of your view. And just to keep things clear, you sort of stage how you want it to look in the FMC, then you deploy it out to the firewall. Okay? Okay. And so let's go to the routing tab. And I just want to illustrate here that there's different kinds of routing. OSPF, EIGRP, RIP, as if anybody uses RIP anymore, BGP, right in here so you can do those various protocols, right, to get yourself set up, just like a router or a switch or anything you do. So then here is how the building a configuration of a next generation firewall works. It's very object-oriented. Anybody do any coding? Understand what object-oriented means? Okay. So you're building these objects and you're putting them together into the programming. And the objects may have variables that you use in various places to put together into the object, to put together into programming. So what we're trying to build here is a series of policies on this firewall that will then all combine together into an access policy. Because the next generation firewall, I'm going to keep calling the NAT because I don't know what else I want to call it besides a network next generation firewall, is really a Swiss Army knife. It does a lot of things. Excuse me. Stateful firewall, VPN, intrusion prevention, malware, missing something. URL filtering, security intelligence, lots of stuff. So it's like I said, a Swiss Army knife, and you got to configure each of those little functionalities through policies. First I want to touch on is the discovery policy. So why do we do a discovery policy? Because, moving on, if you go to policies and then network discovery, then and you can just look and see that you'll notice you got 3 that's hidden back behind here. 3 check boxes that are checked that says hosts and users and applications, right? Maybe that's within the policy itself. Maybe I have to click in there, have a look at it. Okay. So actually, probably more like this. Yeah, there we go. So if we click to open that policy. So what are we doing? We're discovering hosts. So a next generation firewall works like this. It's always watching the traffic that's traversing the firewall to learn your environment. So it learns hosts, devices, users, and applications. And the point of that is that of the endless amount of potential particular hosts or applications in the world, you only have a subset of that in your environment. So what we need to do is tell our discovery policy, learn what we have, so we can build this contextual security contextual security database that just pertains to your network, and continuously learn. So when tomorrow you spin up a new host, or you upgrade all your endpoints, et cetera, it can learn that. And we use that later for intrusion policy rules, which I'll explain in a bit. Okay? So, but what we want to do also is we don't want to learn the internet. We only want to learn our network. So we narrow down our discovery policy, and we just include in there RFC 1918. Don't worry about these lab networks for now. IPv4 private all RFC 1918 is a canned network object that indicates the 3 RFC 1918 addresses. 10.000/8, 172.16.00/12, and 192.168.00/16, right? All those private addresses that aren't allowed to be on the internet. So that's pretty easy. And you might add in here and say, well, why don't we add our own network? We only use 10.12 in our whole network. You can, but this way it's scalable. So down the road, if the network guys who don't know that this is in here, because it's a firewall, decide to add 172.16, and you'd miss that in your discovery, right? So leave it scalable and just say all RFC 1918. That way anybody who adds anything, as long as it's private, can go in there. I don't have any universities here, but some universities use public addresses. That's a good time. Then you have to actually say in here which public address is using. I do have one large university, and they use all private addresses for all their hosts. So that's challenging. But in this case, you understand why I'm doing that, why we're leaving it scalable? So we can add new networks and learn new networks, and the network guys don't necessarily need to say, hey, firewall guys, I need you to add this network to your firewall, because they won't know, right? The network guys. Okay. Yep. And so then from there we can click on zones, and to further narrow it down, we only want to learn, you can specify which zones you want to learn this in. In this case, did I have you pick any of those? Yeah, I had you pick anything that says in zone and add it to the zones. Okay, I think that's a change, right? So we're adding any of these in zone 1, 2, 3, 4 and adding it to the zone. So we'll only discover traffic coming from there, not from the outside. And in this case, not from our DMZ. I don't even think there's DMZ set up here. But you could choose to put in your DMZ just to keep it further narrowed down. Make sense? Yeah. All right. And then when you're done here, we're going to go to, you got to click Add. And then Save to get out of here. And then you're going to be back at this list. You're going to click on Users. And you'll see this list here under Users. Click on that pencil there. Okay? And we're going to uncheck SIP. Why did I do that? Because this is how we're learning our users. And you can glean usernames through all these different protocols and such. But I find sometimes that when learning SIP, so SIP is a protocol for phones, IP telephony, right? When you do that, sometimes when you look in your host table, you get all kinds of junk, and you just say, I don't need all that. I'm going to tone that down, so you can just exclude it. You don't have to, but if you want a cleaner host table, you can do that as well, just to illustrate. But we'll turn it off now and click Save. It's not dependent on doing it, but just to show you how it works. Okay? So just to summarize, we chose the discovery types, applications, users, and hosts, right? We limited our address space and our interfaces and our detection methods. So this will keep the discovery database under control. And what I didn't mention is the host table is limited. It's finite. If you discover everything, it's going to make that table too big. It'll FIFO, and it'll really slow your firewall down. And by default, it's wide open. Okay? So does it make sense why we're narrowing down our discovery policy? So let me explain how intrusion IPS works. At first, it's like, I don't know, it's smoke and mirrors, right? It somehow knows when an intrusion happens. Like anything security or anything really at all, everything is explainable. So here's how intrusion policy works.